Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm Ted Jackson. I'm chair of the group of the 78. Most of you know that we're a foreign policy nonprofit working for peace, disarmament, climate action, and economic and social justice. We support progressive Canadian foreign policy and renewed multilateralism. We're very excited about today's webinar on seeds, biodiversity, and food security. And we're joined by a superb panel of experts to explore these issues today. First, though, I want to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabeg people, who have lived here for thousands of years at this gathering point at the confluence of three rivers. We recognize the damage perpetrated on this land and its original peoples by our colonial institutions. As a foreign policy nonprofit, we support the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The Group of 78 has much to learn and much to do in integrating Indigenous knowledge and perspectives into our work and into the working partnerships that we have and working as an effective ally with Indigenous organizations. Miigwech. I'm really happy to introduce Bruce Moore, who's going to be moderating this session. Bruce is one of Canada's most accomplished development leaders in civil society and the United Nations. Among his many roles in an impressive career, he directed the Rome-based International Land Coalition, an alliance of UN, civil society, and multilateral organizations promoting pro-poor land rights. He's advised the European Commission, FAO, African Union, Asian Development Bank, and the World Bank, and he served on the boards of Transparency International and the Institute of Global Food Security, and much more. Thanks for working with us today, Bruce. Over to you.
Thank you, Ted. That's more than complimentary. I'm actually the one who's most delighted to be meeting many of the people on our panel, but to have renewed my contact with Awegechew, who we met some time ago when he first was exploring his work and sharing his Ethiopian experience with us in some organizations here in Ottawa, Canada. As you will have seen on his CV, Awegechew is a senior research scientist. His research, on the other hand, is not broad-based. It's very specific in that it's specific, in my view, because it really focuses on bringing out the experience of family farmers and taking a very community-based approach to protecting seeds and the fundamental role that we will find the food systems of our world at risk unless we start to take this more seriously and take action on it. His presentation today is going to help us to understand how he sees farmer-scientist collaboration and how we can look towards activating the topic of seeds through policy and other work. We have four panelists that will then join the discussion. The first one is Leaman Belay. He's the co-founder of the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. He's a member of the IPES Food Panel. And these are all basically organizations that are similar in the work of Awegechew in that they focus on farmer-centered activities and trying to advance the knowledge and the experience of small-scale producers and giving food sovereignty that base of support that is so fundamental to moving this topic forward. Another member of our panel is Danna Deaconu, who is a senior program officer with the International Development Research Center, where she's had a strong focus on climate-resistant food systems. And she has worked with many Indigenous and farmer organizations in rural development communities across Latin America in particular, but she's also had field experience in other parts of the world. Another member of our panel is Danna Leaman. She is a conservation biologist. She has done significant work in conjunction with the International Union of Conservation of Nature. She has co-chaired a number of activities that relate to medicinal plants and the sustainable wild collection of medicinal and other commercially useful plants. I'm sure she'll have something very important to add, in particular, as we look at how we can activate some of the ideas that Awegechew will present to us. And finally, the fourth member of our panel is Timothy Wise. He is a senior researcher at Tufts University in the United States. He has been a founder of their work in global development and the Environmental Institute. And his work will come out with a very practical focus, I do believe, because of his recent writings on the very topic of the possible conflict that can occur between the emphasis on small-scale farmers and the interest of larger corporate interests. I have not done any justice to what these various speakers' credentials would cause us to understand. I hope that you'll look at the CVs and bios that were on the advertisement for this webinar and to look them up individually, because they'll all jump off the page as they did for me, but I just Googled their names. So please welcome to the four of you. As we start to move forward, we'd like you, those online, to join us in this discussion. And we'd like you to use the chat line in order as has just come up on the screen to send to us the word that you most associate with the topic of seeds. Just a word, two at the most, so that we can get a sense of where we're starting this discussion. The discussion will continue and you'll be welcome to join us, because we will have a floor discussion which will use the chat, in which we will absorb your ideas and redirect them to the panel later in this webinar, in order that you can bring forward ideas that you believe do require more common action, and where we can look at some takeaways whereby we can contribute to turning this book, All Seeds, into something that it doesn't just start with seeds, as this title of the book reports, but it also causes us to say, if we start with seeds, what can we do to help to advance the ideas in the book that we're about to hear about? As a moderator of this session, I would indicate that I was delighted when Roy asked me to be involved, because my work and my career has centered on the whole issue of farmer-centered development, and how can those of us that are not necessarily parts of the communities where we're working, we're somewhat visitors and enablers, how can we help communities to gain voice, visibility, and opportunity so that they can better become agents of their own development, and we can learn from them, as we will in the morning session, of their experience and the efforts that they are making, not only to advance their own communities, but to share with us fundamentals that need more protection. So with that in mind, let me proceed and invite the author of this magnificent book, Awegechew, to share his key ideas with us. Please, Awegechew, over to you.
So what I'd like to show you and talk is my experience that I gained working with farming communities in some selected countries. So the title is Sustaining and Growing Family Farmers Agriculture, and my lessons. So who are family farmers? The family farmers that I talk about, I work with, the indigenous peoples and traditional farmers are the domesticators, the creators, the innovators of the agriculture that we have today. They created thousands of years ago, and it is evolving as the foundation to humanity's food supply system. To me, the greatest achievement of humanity's creativity, ingenuity, of all things is the creation of agriculture. And that agricultural biodiversity is created by these women and men, remarkable farmers. So, I don't see anything. What's happening here? Okay, it's slow. So these are the family, indigenous people in different parts of the world, specifically in the center of origin and diversity of agriculture, who created the agricultural biodiversity on humanity depends. And as I say, it is the greatest achievement of humanities.
Yes, this is agroclimatic resources.
Yeah, so the environment where these crops are created, diversified, the environment, the climate, the soil, the landscape is diverse, heterogeneous, steep slope, and then the climatic resources are heterogeneous, seasonal, unpredictable. These are the basis for creating these diverse and heterogeneous crop genetic resources all over the world. So diversity is an asset. Variation is the basis, the foundation for the creation of the agricultural biodiversity that is here today to meet multifunctional societal and environmental needs. So when a steep slope is a landscape, seasonality and unpredictability is the climatic resources, and the land holding is fragmented and shrink. Okay, so the landscape is diverse, the crop genetic resources are diverse, and that diversity is not the phenotypic, the morphological, or the color variation. I think it just expresses a result of their identity, their functional relationships. So whatever the crops express in their color, in their morphology, and everything is related to the selection practices of the farmers, their identities, their spirituality. So it's not only the production or anything. The same thing with the system, the agricultural system, the agroecosystem, which is a functional product of the human selection and the environmental selection, is diverse, is heterogeneous, is inclusive, is equitable, is multifunctional. And the agroecological practices is knowledge-based, culture-based, labor-based, wisdom, time-tested, cultural and experiential knowledge, healing, restorative, integrative, is also low impact, is not low input, and is compatible, having a strong relationship with the environment, with the people. So all this diversity creates the heterogeneity of the crops, the culture, the needs, both societal and environmental needs, and evolving and increasing. The other thing is about the ingenuity of the farmers, the women and men farmers who created this system still continuing. Proof demonstrate that it is central to humanity, foundational, key to humanity survival and environmental sustainability. What is wrong here is the system and the people who created the agriculture are subject to undermining, inadaptable, and environmental and societal discrimination and environmental, what's this? Sorry, I couldn't see the slide. Anyway, to environmental insecurity, food insecurity, knowledge loss, and other things. This is wrong. And then they protest. All people who concerned are protesting. It's not only making noise, but protesting with a solution, with innovation. Look, what's happening is wrong. So 30 years ago, right after the UN negotiation meeting, environmental summit in Rio de Janeiro, there was a lots of awareness that there is loss, there is discrimination, there is prejudice, there is injustice against this system. So there is lots of advocacy work at the global level in power against governments, business, and other things. But here, concerned community with public support started on-farm collaborative work. They said, no, we need to do something collaboratively on-farm, in situ, with the farmers to address this issue. So that crisis created an opportunity to work with farmers on-farm, in situ. That's why the collaborative functional relationship, not only functional, faithful relationship with not only scientists, this is a food system that involves institutional disciplines and other things working with farmers on farm for the sake of environmental security and human sustainability. There were 5. I mean, these are not charity or sympathizers, professionals, but who believe, who recognize, accept, cherish the importance of crop diversity, indigenous people, family farmers, and their agricultural biodiversity, their knowledge and practices as foundation to our survival. We need to work. We're at risk. Now, not only at risk. Their vulnerability is the vulnerability of humanity and the environment. So in the areas, in the countries, in the communities where I have been involved, there were five collaborative areas. It's a diverse system. There are many functional collaborative areas. In this case, I set out, and others, colleagues and friends, with farmers collaborating first on seed. Seed means power. Seed means everything. That's the foundation. We need to work on the seed. If the farmers cannot receive seed, then the whole thing will be at risk. The other one is to advance diversity-based cropping systems, because homogeneous monocropping system is not working. So we need to broaden the genetic basis. We need to increase the functional relationship of diversity-based agriculture. The other one is train and retrain people, capacity building, not the farmers, but the externals, to change the attitude, the policies, the practices, the investment to make sure that is in favor of sustainability and security. The other one of the collaboration, functional collaboration, started on mitigating the losses of diversity. Loss of diversity and production to pests in storage system and in the field. I'm not talking about food waste. This is losses of diversity and production that could be consumed, diversity of seeds that can be planted, replanted again. These are at risk because of homogenization. The crops are homogenized and they don't have the resistance to overcome all the pests and diseases that come as a result of climate change, specifically humidity and temperature. The other one is knowledge and practices that created this heterogeneity, particularly with women, the storability knowledge is eroded. We need to strengthen that. We need to struggle. So that's another thing. The other one is, again and again, to work on the agricultural biodiversity through diversity-based agriculture. So this is how it started the collaboration. Sorry, I lost my slides. So the seeds, we need to have seed secured system in the hands of the farmers, not the government, not in the multinational seed companies or fertilizer, insects, herbicides. Seed means everything, the foundation of the agricultural system. And some people, there is a notion that if there is food security, so we don't need to, allow farmers to receive seed. No, there are two separate issues with different implications. The bottom line is seed is the foundation, and addressing seed security through farmer-based seed sources, seed supply system is the way to go. The other one is working farmers and scientists on farm to increase the market value, the adaptability of indigenous crops, so that they can go to the market and they are nutritious, they are acceptable, generate income to the family, especially women. So increasing the adaptability not only for the income, but to broaden the genetic base for any environmental crisis. The issue here is not yield, is not production. In our time, the challenge is adaptive responsive capacity to societal change, environmental changes. The more adaptable plant genetic resources in human being can go to the next life stage. So here we increase. The other one is working on the agroclimatic resources. Climate is a resource, soil is a resource. So we need to enhance, promote, increasing the adaptive capacity of the soil, not only the fertility, using the land as a carbon sink. Soil is the largest land-based sink to sequester, not just in the ocean or down in the deep earth crust, but here as part of the conservation and sustainable use of livelihoods. The other one is to promote home gardens for diet, food, nutrition, and income security, particularly for women and young girls. So here we are, as a result of this collaborative functional relationship, new generation of farmers have been created. Greenhouse gas, conventional agriculture, greenhouse gas based fossil fuel based agriculture has been transformed to diversity based agriculture, busting the myth that diversity based agriculture can feed a modern nation. This is where in the communities, in the countries that have been working, it busted the myth. The other one is enhancing, accepting, embracing diversity-based agriculture, working on ancestral crops. So their diversity, their heterogeneity is an asset, is not a liability. So they should be brought into the production system, not being used only as gene donor to subsidize the commercial industrial agriculture to improve yield and other things. So in their own right, they need to reclaim their foundational role. The other aspect that has been achieved through this collaborative functional relationship is the training, retraining. Attitudes have been changed, policies, practices have been transformed. because this is a unifying issue. Agricultural biodiversity is not something, a political issue or a spirituality. This is a humanity that brings people, everything, every one of us together. So tremendous achievement in terms of changing attitudes, getting public support to continue diversity-based agriculture has been achieved. The other one is restoring degraded agricultural lands, biodiversity, biophysical resources, restored, regenerated. Another key important thing that has been attained through this functional collaborative thing, indigenous people reclaimed, reinstated their ancestral way of life. No one can expect that. For example, in the deep Amazon, bordering Brazil, Argentina, these are high-tech commercial industrial agriculture. The indigenous people, the Guaranis of Bolivians, they could have made billions of dollars, but they rejected profit and then choosing sustainability, resilience, and identity, their ownership. That's it. The other achievement, marginalized, neglected, undermined, time-tested practices, particularly soil management, vertical plowing in the Andes, and then the Zai soil and water conservation practices in the Sahel have been restated. They are working. You go to India, the southern India, commercial agriculture and indigenous cropping systems are working synergistically together. So this is some of the activity achievement that is. So, but the challenge continues. The challenge continues, or all of us, specifically to world agriculture. The challenge is access to sufficient, nutritious, healthy, affordable food that is sustainably produced. I underline that, sustainably produced, because the failure of industrial commercial agriculture is the environmental sustainability. So this is a challenge. And then to meet this challenge, the basis for this, the source for this is access and availability of diverse, heterogeneous agricultural biodiversity, knowledge and practices owned, used by the indigenous people, family farmers all over the world. They are the key holders for sustainability and diversity. We need to work with them. Yes?
We do Awegechew, and I know.
I'm coming. Just 3 minutes. So we need to work with the key holders. These are the farmers. It just is not only interested in the biodiversity they are maintaining, but the people have to be there. So they are ready for functional collaboration. Let's work with them. So, Mr. Moderator Bruce, what I'd like to propose on this platform for conversation, 4 points. 1, seed sources, seed security, seed systems should be in the hands of the farmers. Number 2, diversity-based agriculture should be practiced by any form of production system and agricultural system. And specifically, there should be a strategic, conscious investment in ancestral heritage crops with tremendous adaptive capacity to address the food security of our time. The other one is, in all this, we need to work with the farmers. In the absence of the farmers, nothing can be achieved. And then the farmers are ready for synergistic, functional, and faithful collaboration. Partnership with the farmers, the way to go. Let's work with them. Let's work with the soil, with. Thank you.
Thank you, Awegechew. Your final closing, I think, is very central to many of the key points you've taken, which is how can we pursue the various points that you have brought to our attention, and having this farmer-centered and farmer-led approach in order to protect the seeds, but to protect our food system through the role of people at the local community is so fundamental. I'm sure that some of our panelists will give you room to expand on these as we continue, and you may wish to bring us back to some of these key points later in the webinar. But first, I'm going to invite one of our panelists, Anna. Your work in Latin America has touched on the relationship between agrobiodiversity and women's empowerment. Can you comment on that with respect to today's discussion?
Yeah, hi, and thank you so much for having me here. I assume you can hear me all right. Can you give me confirmation, Bruce?
I can hear you fine. I assume others can.
Great. All right. Well, in Agachew's book, what really struck me was that we noted numerous examples of women acting as the primary custodians of biodiversity through all sorts of creative initiatives around seeds, markets, production, food sovereignty. So this really reminded me of the research around biodiverse production and especially agroecology in relation to women's empowerment. And I know that there's research about this around the world, but my own experience is more based in Latin America. And so I wanted to speak about an experience in Guatemala, for example, where a recent survey found that agroecology was associated significantly with a number of women's empowerment indicators, for example, control of money, control over household decisions. But of course, this was a snapshot in time. So this didn't tell us anything about causality. So did engaging in these agrobiodiversity-based processes support women to be more empowered, or was empowerment a precondition for women to be able to engage? Quite possibly it's a bit of both. And so here in some work funded by IDRC in Ecuador, there's quite a bit of interesting research that provided a bit more qualitative nuance that I wanted to speak to. For example, in that case, many women spoke of how their involvement in agroecological farmers associations allowed them to find their voice, to take charge of their health, to put money in their pockets. They really credited this agroecological biodiverse process for this very empowering experience. But often these success stories were wrapped up in gender inequalities, and many even had to overcome domestic violence to be able to take part. And so as much as women valued their participation in these processes, they also spoke about not sleeping, not eating, not resting, all because they were so busy all the time with the farming activities, association meetings, trainings, market activities, and all of this on top of the care activities that they already had to do at home. So if we turn back to Agachew's book, he also really highlights the importance of women in so many exciting initiatives around seeds, around diversity. And this is very positive as it highlights women's leadership, but it also begs the question of whether biodiversity is yet another responsibility that falls disproportionately on women. So I'm hoping if we get a chance to hear from Awegechew again later in this webinar, I'd love to hear some of your reflections on this gender dimension from your experience. And perhaps you can also speak to whether and how men might be more engaged. Thank
you, Anna. We will turn to Awegechew after we hear from your fellow panelists, but you've raised some very fundamental points. So we will hear from the others and then we will continue. Million, would you like to share some thoughts on what you've heard presented so far this morning?
Thank you Thank you very much. Thank you inviting me, and I would like to thank also Dr. Awegechew for writing this excellent book, timing book. So I'll present my comment in a speech. Um, Thank you very much for inviting me to engage with this important book. From my perspective, all starts with SIDS, speaks directly to the heart of the struggles, innovations, and hopes shaping African food systems today. Some short points. Number one of the strongest contribution of this book is its insistence that family farmers are not beneficiaries of development, but the architects of agriculture itself. The book powerfully reminds us that farming systems did not emerge from laboratories or policy frameworks. They were built through generations of observation, experimentation, and adaptation by farmers themselves. This resonates deeply with my experience across Ethiopia, Kenya, Ghana, Senegal, and beyond. African family farmers operate in complex, diverse, and often harsh environments, yet they continue to feed the continent. The book rightly showed that this resilience comes from farmers' deep ecological knowledge that modern agriculture policy too often ignores or dismisses. The second point is I strongly aligns with the book's central argument that seeds are the foundation of food systems, not merely inputs. Seeds carry culture, memory, biodiversity, and autonomy. In African context, seed systems are embedded in social relations, exchange, reciprocity, celebration, and collective stewardship. The book's emphasis on farmers' managed system, local seed banks, and farmers-led breeding reflects what AFSA defends daily. Without seed sovereignty, food sovereignty is impossible. Corporate seed regimes, intellectual property laws, and restrictive seed policies undermine farmers' ability to adapt to climate change and erode biocultural diversity. What this book does well is show the farmer seed systems are not backward or informal. They are dynamic, innovative, and future oriented. They are essential for resilience in a time of climate uncertainty. Third point, the book's framing of agroecology as diverse, regenerative, multifunctional system aligns closely with my understanding. Agroecology is not just about replacing chemical inputs, it's about redesigning food systems to work with nature, culture, and community. Across Africa, I see agroecology restoring soils, increasing biodiversity, stabilizing yields, and strengthening livelihoods. But just as importantly, agroecology restores agency. It allows farmers to decide what they grow, how they grow it, and for whom. The book reinforces a critical message. Agroecology works because it's knowledge intensive and not capital intensive. This makes it particularly suited to family farming in smaller contexts. A key insight from the book is that crisis facing family farmers is not lack of productivity or innovation, but structural exclusion. Farmers face barriers to land, markets, finance, infrastructure, and most importantly, decision making processes. I would add that these barriers are political. Policies continue to privilege industrial export oriented models while marginalizing farmers led systems. This is why AFSA emphasizes participatory action research because transformation requires farmers to be co-producers of knowledge and policy, not just source of data. The book's analysis helps expose how dominant narratives, especially those tied to green revolution, crowd out alternatives that are already working on the ground. Five, I strongly endorse the book's call for functional and respectful collaboration with farmers. Too often, collaboration means extracting farmers' knowledge without shifting power. The book challenges this by insisting on partnership that recognizes farmers as equal actors. From my experience, genuine collaboration means investing time in dialogue, building trust, respecting local institutions, and allowing farmers to define priorities. This approach not only improves the outcomes, it strengthens democracy and social cohesion. Finally, all starts with Swedes contribute to a broader narrative shift that I consider essential. Africa does not need saving by external technologies or models. Africa needs recognition as a continent of solutions. In conclusion, from my perspective, this book is important because it does not romanticize farmers, nor does it reduce them to victims. It presents them as agents of change, capable of sustaining and growing agriculture if their rights, knowledge, and systems are respected. All starts with seized reminds us that future of food will not be built by scaling technologies alone, but by restoring power to those who have fed humanity for millennia, family farmers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milian. You've certainly added to our discussion and capsulated some of the key messages that come out of this marvelous book. I'll turn now to Danna. Your work has focused on the sustainable use of wild, harvested, medicinal, and aromatic plants rather than on food and forage. Are there some key messages in All Starts with Seed for sustainability of medicinal and aromatic plant land races?
Yes, thank you for that question. I'm really delighted to say that reading All Starts with Seed has, for me, given me a framework to understand from a very different perspective some of the conservation challenges that that my colleagues in the conservation world face with how to see possible solutions for conserving this really diverse range of species that are important to human health and well-being. I've been immersed in the sort of a world of seeing conservation as of medicinal plants as sort of saving one species at a time. You know, the taxonomy of these species varies enormously. But I think that the what we've been grappling with, and perhaps not very successfully, is the role of traditional and indigenous people in stewarding this resource, and the wealth of knowledge that they have in managing this resource in multiple ways. So the approaches vary almost as much as the taxonomy of this this group of very important species. So I'd just like to say that we're the development of interest, commercial interest in medicinal and aromatic plants as the demand for wild species, wild harvested species, becomes much greater. I'm seeing very similar trends in moving from these local systems of stewardship to industrial scales of production, making many of the same mistakes that Awegechew points out from his experience working with farmers. And I think this is All Starts with Seed provides a playbook, I think, of looking at where we might be headed, but how we might better in the conservation community appreciate and work with I think collaboration is exactly the right word. Collaborate much more effectively with the communities who whose wisdom and practice has indeed provided the world with this knowledge. So seeing medicinal and aromatic plants as just this broader layer of the multifunctional uses that that communities and farming communities have made of their biodiversity, and applying some of these same lessons to how we approach conservation of medicinal and aromatic plants is I think a very enriching perspective for the kind of work that I'm involved in.
Well, thank you, Danna. That has continued to add to the richness of the discussion. I'm sure that Awegechew will have comments to respond to your comments. But before we open it up to him and to others, Timothy, could you tell us that in your book, Eating Tomorrow, you report finding a wide range of just the sorts of farmer-led agroecological projects that Awegechew describes. You also highlight the many obstacles they face, from large corporations to unsupportive governments and policies that get in the way of adopting many of the things that have been said. What conditions do such projects are required for such projects to become successful?
Thank you so much, Bruce, and thanks, Awegechew, for such a useful contribution to the literature on this. The range across the globe is so welcome for seeing the commonalities and the unique experiences that different communities face. There are so many obstacles put up, as Million said, by policymakers and large agricultural interests. But I thought I'd contribute a description of what I saw in Mexico in one particular community, because I think what's needed is really, to succeed, you really need a high degree of economic and political power and autonomy in these communities, which they can achieve with organization and a long struggle for supportive policies, as Million pointed out. In Quetzalan, in the state of Puebla in Mexico, there's a group called Tosepan Titatanisque, which means together we shall overcome, in the Nahuatl language there. I visited there in researching my book. Don't think small is beautiful, think big is powerful. These are 400 groups together, 410 cooperatives involving more than 30,000 families in 25 different municipalities within their territory. Why are they successful? Well, some of that is that Mexico had a revolution in the early part of the 20th century, and collective land ownership. They live on their own land, which is owned collectively and not subject to privatization in the ways that it is in most parts of the world. More than half the agricultural land in Mexico is owned by and managed by indigenous or farming communities. And in indigenous communities like this one, leaders can be elected without party affiliation in town meetings, a right granted to these communities by the Constitution. They've had to fight for these rights, but this allows them to really nurture an impressive cultural cohesion and preservation of their traditional indigenous cultures. They have an independent bilingual Nahuatl Spanish school that they run in their own community. They've preserved the tradition of tequio, which is the contribution of community labor by all residents of the community. Interesting, that includes migrants who send back money and get checked off as having contributed to the community. But they reinforced some of these achievements and rights with their own zoning plan that they came up with and a territorial defense committee to prevent large-scale corporate incursions on their territory. There was a large cloud forest ecotourism project, and they noticed in their research that there were 98 other large-scale land concessions to mining, hydroelectric, commercial projects. And so they used a tool in the Mexican Constitution to allow them to create an ecological land use zoning for their region. And that effectively prevented and excluded most mega projects as being categorically incompatible with their zoning. Through their lawsuits and direct action, they've stopped 4 hydroelectric projects. They've stopped a Walmart development. But what they really have in Mexico that is unique, I think, and points to something Awegechew has pointed out about centers of origin for seeds, is Mexico is the center of origin for corn, and they have access to very high quality native seeds, which have been preserved and developed. Greatest diversity in the world, 64 land races, more than 22,000 identified distinct varieties adapted over millennia to local ecologies and the cultural preferences of those communities. And those are highly productive seeds. Multi-cropping is still common in this community, strengthening the quality of the soil. And GM corn is not permitted for cultivation. Thanks to pressure on the Mexican government. They get good rainfall. They have pretty good quality land. They produce a lot of export. They produce export crops like shade coffee and pepper, and they grow nearly all their own food. I mean, this is a remarkable set of communities and what they've achieved under these kind of conditions is also remarkable. But what they allow the community to do is engage strategically with the global economy, not isolate themselves, but to do so on their own terms. And since 2018, that's also produced a change in government at the national level that supports many of their own goals, including last year a constitutional amendment that banned the cultivation of GM corn in all of Mexico. These are not conditions that most farmers enjoy, but I think it points to what farmers can and should be fighting for, which is a greater level of local control and autonomy. And you see that in a lot of parts of the world that I studied. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I think that of the many comments that we've heard and that Awegechew might wish to address, we are hearing a number of speakers mention the very powerful and comprehensive information that this book is bringing forward. It brings into one place many of the lessons and much of the information that should cause, but it will be challenged to bring about change in the way we look at our global food systems, the way in which we truly involve people in making decisions for themselves, for their communities, and to have an impact more broadly speaking. We've heard a number of comments that fall under an extension of what Leaman referred to as structural exclusion. We've heard of the knowledge base that exists and can be provided in the African and also the Mexican and other examples. We have heard considerable mention of the role of farmer and farmer-centered development, but how do we get farmers to a more central place, as Tim has just reflected on influencing public policies at the national and global level? These are some of the key messages. And what are some of the institutions, like the Consultative Group on International Agriculture Research, that continues to be driven by corporate interests, and the corporate support to that part of the multilateral system. How can we bring about change? And Awegechew thought that in responding to your comments, he would also try to look at the actionable nature of how we can move forward on what he shared with us. So Awegechew, would you like to begin by commenting on some of the points that our panelists have put before you, not necessarily the ones that I have tried to summarize, but any of the ones that come to your mind as being essential for us to take away from today's webinar, please.
Thank you, Bruce. First, I'll start to comment on Anna's question on women and agricultural biodiversity. Excuse me. This is not to be politically correct, that women do play a critical functional role in the conservation and sustainable use of agricultural biodiversity, in the creation of agricultural biodiversity. This is a functional, not the biological functional role. So here, but because of institution, cultural practices, customs, there is not a question of equality. There is a question of equity. So that's how I look at it. It's not, yes, equality is important, but equity. So in my work, in my experience, I learn a lot in all the places that I have been, working on agricultural biodiversity from women, on seed selection and management. But they have challenged our mothers and sisters, access to land, access to means of production, access even to some of the seeds they conserve. Yes, they cultivate, but do not have the access. So we need to transform, to change, empower. Well, for me, at times I have troubles with the word empower or enablement. But we need to make sure that the world needs to make sure that there is equity in terms of their functional role. For example, in our work, in my collaborative work with others, the community seed bank is managed by women. So that's empowerment. They have the access to exchange, to sell, conserve, and use the seed under their control. Home gardens, market gardens is a tool of empowering so that they get the diet, the nutrition, the food diversity, the income security to support their farm. They are in charge. So with this kind of thing, and then create a mechanism to have access to land, not only access to own, the right to own the land. So if society makes that change, transformation, then we'll have the continued availability of diversity of seeds, knowledge and practices to sustain us, to sustain the environment. So that's how I look at it, and that's what my experience. And then there are dozens of volumes of research on gender and agricultural biodiversity. In some cases, they say 80% of agricultural work is done by women and others. But the point is, we need to have the tools, the mechanisms to address the inequity in gender and functional role of women and young women and men farmers. That's what I would say. So the community seed bank, home gardens, market gardens, and access to land and the right to own land and means of production is a way to empower, to enable them to have the equity addressed. Coming back to Danna, where my focus, my work is agricultural biodiversity. And when we talk agricultural agricultural biodiversity is inclusive. Is inclusive in which medicinal plants are part and parcel of the whole effort. But in this case, my focus, my work was marginalized farmers' variety, ancestral crops, food crops. That means it doesn't exclude medicinal plants or other agricultural biodiversity resources. So, but separately, as you know, when we're at University of Ottawa, we did some studies in Timor, Belize, and related directly, and your own work in Indonesia on medicinal plants. Directly, what I have done is related to storage pests, field pests. I studied on botanicals and then natural products that can repel, mitigate, and fumigate storage and field pests and integrated pest management practices. So here, the farmers do know, farmers know all these highly bioactive plant products for the health of the environment, for the health of the plants and humanity. The other thing is, if you look at the chapter on Mali, the country program Mali, there out of the 14 listed multi-purpose plants, 50% of them have medicinal components. So medicinal and other bioactive, all this, that part and parcel, but specifically the purpose of this study, this collaborative work or agricultural biodiversity, specifically on ancestral heritage crops that have been created, maintained by women and men, indigenous people, family farmers, traditional ones, since the beginning of agriculture. We call them is a derogatory word, land races. And if you can see Tim's screen, there is a maize all the way that stretches from British Columbia to the tip of Argentina or Chile. So those ones, the one that we have been working because they have been neglected, marginalized, and being used as a gene donor, and then only marginalized by the few staple crops like maize itself, commercial crop, rice, and wheat. So that's my observation to Danna's question or observation. The other one is related to Tim's agricultural practices. So when we talk about agriculture, it's a relationship. It's a relationship with the plants, a relationship with the soil, a relationship among ourselves, a relationship among the plants themselves, the system. That's what it means. Is it regenerative? Is it restorative? Or is it only mining and killing? So we need that agroecological practices, the practice that highlights, shows the bonding between plant, soil, and the environment. Because this is not a synthetic biology. This is a life, a living, that's the life-sustaining, the biosphere, which is the agroecosystem there. The good thing is it is finite, but is regenerative, is reusable, restorative. So we need to cherish, practice agroecological practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Awegechew. I would like to just intervene a little bit, not having been a panelist, but it seems to me from my work that a lot of your research is really all behind it, giving strong emphasis to the role of farmer-centered, but smallholder agriculture and smallholder production systems. And we've heard a number of people talk about how we have to support those and their local organizations to gain influence within the structures where they are located. We know there's an inverse relationship between farm size and productivity. We know a number of these things that would be supplementary to the research that you have done. But how are we going to give voice? People have used the word helping people to gain voice and helping them to gain influence in order that what they have, what they're doing to protect our future food systems has an influence on the structures that exist, whether they're the research structures, the UN systems. How do we deal with this issue of corporate versus smallholder production systems? What are some of the things that we need to start to think about doing in order that all that you've put into this book, which is a case for why we need to, but the how to have this taken up by those who are in powerful positions remains a challenge. And I think a number of people have spoken to that. Maybe I could open up to any of the other panelists that would like to comment on this and for you to have a few other comments. But I do think we need to delve a little bit deeper into how are we going to strengthen the organizations of the very people who are protecting these seeds and this knowledge, and to avoid it being grabbed, because land grabbing is a major global issue these days, by corporations that will grab those things for the profit motivation versus protecting our future food systems. Could we talk a little bit more on these subjects on the chat line? This is the information that's being fed to me. What's the potential for collaboration? Which systems are the ones we're most likely to be able to penetrate in order to have this research that you've done taken up and given serious consideration? Can I open the discussion that way to yourself and to any of the panelists?
So
please.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you, Bruce. Yes. Here, there are words, distracting words, phrases that are being used in characterizing the indigenous cropping systems, the agricultural biodiversity. Whether these phrases are used intendedly or unintendedly, they are not helping. They are not sending a message. Number one, people use small. They are not small. Yes, their land could be small and fragmented, but we need to look at not their size, the heterogeneity, the diversity of the resources they have, their attitude, their practices. That's one. And then there is a word that is low input. For heaven's sake, they are not low input. They are low impact. That means they have got a functional relationship. They are not destructive. And then they are as primitive. So the point here to have a functional relationship to work with them, so that they are not making only cases. They are not resisting, crying out, but they are showing, demonstrating, look, the other systems are depending on us. They showed the results. They are the basis. So through public support, through evidence-based original research products, and then given what the other system is now floundering because of environmental insecurity, it just is working against all the climate change, the societal diverse needs, is working high input, homogenized agriculture on this thing. So we need to produce this public support, field-based research products, working with the farmers to demonstrate, to show the liabilities, the risk by the other. But it just is not the accusing or talking about risk and other things, to come together, because we share the same planet, the same biosphere. So is the survival, the sustenance, the diversity, the vibrancy of the traditional farming system is the vibrancy of the other. So we need to continue working, demonstrating what the original evidence is there to work diversity-based agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Tim, Anna, Danna, if you have any comments on the overall nature of today's discussion that you'd like to respond to, and also on this structural question of how to have our views carried forward and build off of what's in this book. Would any one of you have a comment you'd like to share?
I mean, I could share one brief comment, which is that I think Awegechew is exactly right about the role of and the mischaracterizations of this kind of agriculture. And my presentation here certainly presented one case where a lot has been achieved, but under somewhat unique circumstances, right? Control of your land, control of your seeds, rich seed diversity, etc. I also saw lots of cases where farmers were achieving an enormous amount without those kind of supportive conditions in place. And Million, I think, was speaking of AFSA's work everywhere that is really working with farmers whose governments are not supporting what they're doing, and they don't have all those favorable conditions, but they're making incredible achievements otherwise. I'd just point you and the people here to an interesting campaign that AFSA, the Food Sovereignty Alliance in Africa, has been doing for a number of years now, called My Food is African. And it's just a very straight up campaign to restore respect and pride in African food, and then boost up policies that support the farmers who are growing that kind of food. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Danna or Anna, would you like to add anything further?
Yeah, I really appreciate your comment, Awegechew, on the power of language, the words we use, thinking of the communities that I worked with in Borneo, in East Kalimantan, the term used for their system of rice cultivation at the time was slash and burn, and so the project that I was part of really demonstrated the incredible amount of wisdom and knowledge that these communities had in how they managed forest and cleared fields for rice, for dry land rice farming, and resisted the pressure from various levels of government to switch their methods to wet rice farming, knowing that this would be devastating to the sustainability of their farming system. So I just I think the terminology, switching to Swidden or Swidden kind of cultivation, the amount of respect that has really changed the way we see these kinds of farming systems. The terminology is very important.
Thank you. Anna, I'm putting you always on the spot, but I don't want to miss any further opportunity you might like to take.
No, I just like to, I really appreciate all of the many dimensions that came into play in this discussion. What we see is that farming is not just about agriculture. It is about agriculture, but it's also about medicine. It's about health. It's about empowerment. It's about dignity. It's about cooperation, co-creation. And a lot of this really has been put into words more and more over the past couple of years, and we see this when we see the high-level panel of experts on food security and nutrition articulate the 13 principles of agroecology. The FAO, prior to that, they'd spoken about a similar set of 10 principles. And so we're really seeing a lot more, I guess we could say, agreement on all of these numerous dimensions that come into play in creating what we hope for in terms of not just sustainable farming systems, but in terms of greater food systems overall. So I really appreciate that. And I'm actually quite eager to turn it to the audience. I don't know when it's their turn for the questions and answers.
The main questions that I've seen, unless those who are helping me see others, I think we've addressed them. I've tried to interweave them, and that is the potential for collaboration. We should maybe just emphasize, are there other areas where there's greater potential than we've already commented upon, and how to have the influence of important learning, such as Awegechew has prepared, taken to the national and global level. You just mentioned, Anna, the FAO and other organizations. So these are two of the questions that we've had. And a third point, if anybody, Roy, I think I see your hand up. Is there something you'd like to add?
Yes, there's a comment in the chat box, which I think is worthy of our consideration, and it reflects many of the interventions that have been made by people throughout this webinar. It's from David Rain, and he says, as important as it is, can improved farmer-scientist collaboration offer meaningful support to family farmers, seed-saving farmers around the world on its own, without also a very strong international political dimension, pushing back against the powerful forces that are working against their interests. In other words, is political action an essential part of any hope of helping family farmers, seed-saving farmers around the world? I thought that was a very succinct and powerful expression of what a few people have said in the course of our discussion.
Yes, we have heard people speak about examples. Tim's given examples of where people have gained more voice, but also of cases where they have not. We've heard comments made about the rights to own land, and therefore what is the effect of that. So I think that is a very good comment. You've all heard what has been said, including by Roy. Anyone like to add any response to that? Ted?
Yeah, I just, not so much a response, but just to say that we've had some other good questions as well in the Q&A box. And there have been a couple of questions around which Awegechew may want to answer later as we wind out of this, but around what motivated you to write the book in the first place. So that's a good question, but maybe for later. In the short term, there are several questions on, can you provide more examples, which are probably in the book, but you didn't have time for, specific cases of very successful farmer-managed seed systems in Africa. And another question around Ethiopia itself and examples of good practices there around balancing farmer, traditional practices on the one hand with modern commercial activity on the other, and how you achieve that balance. But there were two questions also on Canada, which I wanted to raise, Bruce. One is a general question around what are the potential win-win scenarios between local farmers on the one hand and Canada on the other. What are the challenges there? And another question which came out of the gate very quickly because it's very timely is the following from Richard. PM Carney has announced that he's cutting back on farm research at 6 research farms. How should we counteract this move? So obviously there's pressure on the development budget in general, and how to protect the kinds of things that need to be funded aligned with what Awegechew is promoting and advocating. Many people here advocating. So just wanted to raise those questions for your consideration.
Well, we've got a lot of questions from yours to ones that Roy has raised. But perhaps in terms of closing for the moment, because these are questions that we can answer and share with the audience in another form, but it would be good to look at how can we bring this home. In terms of those organizations like the National Farmers Union, are they a potential partner with us? What are they doing regarding research centers? At any rate, please, Awegechew, you almost have the final comments, but got a couple of minutes, and let's give room for the couple of other people to comment should they wish. But please.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Well, speaking of exemplary good practices, I'm glad you use the word good practices, not best practices. There's no comparison, has no place there. It's a context. So you go to Cuba, favorable policy, investment, busted the myths of diversity-based agriculture can feed a modern, nation like Cuba. This is people movement. And then an agreement with support from the government. You go to my own country where I started my field-based research, the amount of not diversity, but the knowledge and practices, it just blew me away. I come here as, Agriculture Canada, University of Ottawa and Carleton, 3 laboratories, took me a year, another. Their consensus knowledge just is 98, 96% correlation with what I've done. So, and then I question myself, why in my lifetime, always I hear this misery. What's wrong? What is this? So at the end of the day, I realize that is leadership, not recognizing, not accepting. And then, what motivates me? I mean, you go South India, all over in the Himalayas, there are exemplary works where humanity's best, creativity, ingenuity, just working at its best is incredible. But why in many cases, not the whole world, in many cases, why is the world fail to understand, enhance, and use into a good use for our own survival? That has to be addressed. So for the question, what motivates me? Joyfully, I feel the responsibility, a joyful responsibility to give witness what all these women and men, farming communities, in the places, in the communities I have been, is overwhelming. The amount of diversity. When we do exchange visits, Africans and Latin Americans and Asians, it just incredible. There is this unifying language, not religion, not ideology, but this agricultural biodiversity, humanity created, it is there. And then at the same time, you see unnecessary injustice. So I say, I need to give witness. This is not right. So just to give witness, that's it. And I'm happy through the help of Larry Matthews, gave me a purpose, and I produced this book. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've summarized what many of us are thinking, is that you are giving witness, and your testimony through your book is something that we need to say, how can we give further witness? How can we be voices to spread the messages that you put into that book and turn that to further advantage on behalf of community farmers? I think that if there is any final comment that any of our panelists would like to make, there are many questions that have been left unanswered by especially Roy and Ted's intervention. But please just give you one last chance before we will have to close. I think we'll take it that we've done what we can, but for those people who are online, who've stayed with us, who've sent in very interesting comments, we would like to ask you this question. What was or will be your biggest takeaway from this webinar? If you would kindly give thought to that, we know you will give thought to that, but to also send it in, along with the other questions that have been recently summarized for us that we didn't get to answer. We will use these as a way to continue this discussion and to see where further collaboration may be taken through the G78, who I would like to thank them for the opportunity to be part of this event and to thank them for inviting our panelists, but in particular to recognize the importance of giving voice to Awegechu's book and the very topic that has brought us together for the last half an hour to start with seeds. How can we start or restart after this webinar our commitment to trying to assist in this cause, which has been, we have witnessed how Awegechew has been giving witness to this, and we can join him in his efforts to have more activities undertaken and political choices made in favor of learning from this work. Thank you.
Bruce?
Yes.
Can I say something? Sorry about the PowerPoint presentation. So if it's possible, we can post it so that the participants can access it. So is it possible to do that, Roy?
Yes. Yes, that will be done.
Yes, it will be done. And in particular, I see that, Ted, you're putting a very good point together. You know, comments in particular, how can we also align the lessons and thoughts that you take away from this webinar with having political influence in current systems and current ways in which decisions are being made?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. I turn back perhaps to you, Ted, as the chair of G78, if you would kindly bring about a closure to this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce, and thanks to all the panelists, especially Awegechew for superb work and very thoughtful comments. Obviously, there's more to do here, and you all are working in very important areas. So G78 will support and is very open to doing more in this area if it would be complementary to what you're doing. We've learned a great deal here, and we really appreciate everybody here. We had in the mid-50s in terms of numbers of people here online and others who had registered. So there's significant interest. And I know some of the individuals online, and they're very strong leaders in their own right. So we've got something here. Let's see. We'll think more about what to do with this tremendous human resource. Thanks again so much to Awegechew. Thanks to everyone for being on this. Thanks to Bruce for your thoughtful moderation. And I think we can, in North America anyway, go to lunch now. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.